Welcome to everybody on Facebook Live and to everybody who's joined us directly on Zoom. This is Keep the Ghost Light On from the Sherman Players and the Sherman Playhouse with your hosts, that's me, Steve Stott, and Robin Frome. There's Robin. We've got three great guests tonight. We've got Julie, Bob, and Jeff. Robin will introduce them as we go along. We're going to talk about their lives, COVID, and anything else that comes to mind. So, Robin, over to you.
Yes. We're going to start with Mr. Jeff Tuohy, who was one of my best drama students ever. Of course, it was 8th grade, and he was in his prime. But
didn't you say that last week to the other guy?
they all start around that time. But very talented. I remember being in a meeting with Linda Van Wagenen and a couple other teachers, and they go, you know, he just bursts out into opera when he wants to. You know, he just sings some opera. So I was looking forward to meeting him. And then he did a few shows with me in Woodbury, and then his career really took off, and we're all very proud of him. So Jeff, give us the highlights of your career, what you do, stuff like that.
Well, thank you for that that very pleasant intro. I appreciate it, and I'm very flattered. So yeah, I mean, you know, I started kind of in the entertainment industry when I was young, or started pursuing a lot of different theater and music through grade school, whatever. I did a lot of local work with Main Street Theater Company, with you, of course. I did some work with Seven Angels Theater as well in Waterbury, which is actually where I ultimately got my equity card later on, right out of college. Did a lot of drama and whatnot at Pomperog High School, and a lot of playing, and then ultimately ended up at Emerson College. Originally went in as a BFA for music theater, and then switched to a BA in acting instead, and I added marketing, so PR and advertising to that as well, because I thought it would be a good combination, like, you know.
Are we frozen?
Yes, I believe we've frozen with Jeff. So give it a second.
Down to New York City.
Yeah, we lost you for a moment to then, Jeff.
Oh, sorry, you got me back now?
Yeah, you froze. Yeah, but you're back now.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
You're back.
So yeah, moved to New York City right out of college, and then just kind of started hitting all the auditions and all of that, and released a record. So took the band on tour around the country a few times, and whenever timing allowed and I was home, I would, or home in New York, I should say, I would try to do some shows. So did a lot of regional work at Seven Angels Theater. I'd done some work in New Milford Theater Works as Bat Boy, and also for the last 5 years, I played Jamie in that and was in Little Me. And then off Broadway, I did a show called The 12, which was with my late friend Nick Cordero, who we unfortunately just lost to COVID not long ago, and a couple other great performers, Tony Vincent, a lot of great. Robert Schenken had written the book for that, who a lot of people know him for Hacksaw Ridge or for the Kentucky Cycle. Did a show called The Moon and the Sea with Lena Hall of Hedwig fame, and also my friend Nick Cordero was in that one. Yeah, and then my most recent thing that I had done was it was called Small Town Confessions, which was written by Phil Jeffrey Bond, who ran the programming at 54 Below for quite a bit of time, and that was a really fun cast. Alice Ripley was in it, Kelly Rabke. It was nice to do a lot of those shows and kind of feel like you have to raise the bar because of the town around you, and that kind of brings us to now. We just finished a new record, which we started in August. It's got 11 tracks on it. Some of it's in the vein of my song Bourbon Street, which has done pretty well on Pandora and Spotify and all that. It's got a New Orleans feel, obviously. And so this one's called Hudson Delta. And, it's a combination. It runs the gamut between, we call it kind of like a Southern road trip narrated by a Bleecker Street troubadour. So that kind of brings us up to now and figuring out what the next move is.
So, Jeff, the band is called the Jeff Tuohy Band. Am I right?
Yeah, it's actually just, when you search it online, it's just under my name, Jeff Tuohy, which is Tuohy.
Okay, so have the gigs dried up, or are you doing okay with the gigs at these times?
The gigs, so I mean, a lot of what what we did, it was interesting. I was trying to, a lot of people were jumping on the whole streaming thing and kind of soliciting tips and all that stuff. So I initially tried to stay away from it just because I felt like everybody else was doing it. And then one of my friends, one of the other players from down in New York City, he lives in Astoria. He said, he's like, dude, you got to do this thing. He's like, I'm hearing people are making crazy money. So I did 3 or 4. One of them I did from home where I'm sitting right now. One I did from a friend's house. One I did from my parents' driveway, and we did it as a 3-piece. And then one we did from the Oakdale Theater and streamed that live. So initially we did a bunch of that. Luckily I was working on the record, so we didn't really finish the mixing. A lot of people had done their background vocals or flown in tracks from their home studios, and then I would send back critiques, or I would FaceTime with them and kind of go over, how we could tweak it. So by the time we were done with the mix, which can always take a bit of time, and then the mastering, it was about late June, early July. So the focus was primarily on the recorded aspect. And then now we're starting to see some gigs, occasional outdoor. We played this place called O'Neill's Irish Pub in South Norwalk, where we usually do their St. Patrick's gig for a couple of people, but they've found a nice way to really separate tables, and they have it really nicely set up with a turf and all that. So that was a gig that we've a couple times. I've done a private event or two. Those have been happening, in people's backyards or whatever, smaller numbers than we're used to. And then what we have coming up, we're going to be doing somewhat of a car rally at Quasi Amusement Park. They're going to be doing a big drive-in theater and hot rod rally. So they're setting us up on a stage there. And then we're going to be doing a show up at Stowe, Vermont for an event called Rally to Give. It's kind of affiliated with a lot of people who do the gumball race and all that, if you've ever heard of that. And Whistle Pig is involved with that. So we're doing partnerships. So there are gigs, and a lot of our gigs have been moved to next year. So 2021 is getting really busy because we had the 2021 gigs already booked, and now a bunch of work that we had from April through October moved to 2021. And we have deposits coming in because people are really itching, I think, to get back to having entertainment at their events or whatever it is. So we have a lot of deposits coming in. So I mean, we're trying to water. Which is good. I mean, I think the most valuable thing that I found from this whole COVID experience was it gave me a second to break out of the grind and to really think about what I was doing and reevaluate my plan of attack. Obviously, if you're an entertainer, as anybody on this feed can probably relate, when you're an entertainer, you gotta make it happen. I mean, you're an independent. You're not only an independent business owner, but you're also making it happen. You're making it happen. From my point, I have to make it happen creatively as far as songwriting and the performance of it. And then I have to do all the staffing, but then I have to negotiate the contracts. And when it's busy, especially in the summertime, I mean, it's, there's times where it's 8 or 9 gigs a week. We'll be doubling up on some days, if we're out on Nantucket or in Vermont. So, it was nice to just hit pause. Coincidentally, I was working on a creative endeavor, which was great. So it really gave me a chance to just ask myself, okay, what kind of gigs do I want to play, and which kind of gigs do I want to leave behind? Kind of how do I graduate? How do I get closer to what my aspirations have been since I was singing opera outbursts in the middle of English class. So it's the good thing about COVID is I think it's made people appreciate live music more. I mean, how attentive people were at some of the first gig back, which normally could have been considered a pub gig, like the attention that was focused on just the music and people paying attention. I think that there was a real appreciation because they realized they had taken it for granted. So I think that was a positive. The other positive was, I really have had time to just focus on the next creative outlet of putting this record out and figuring out my plan. Whereas before, like I said, you'd be rallying from gig to gig. And I will say that definitely the first 3 to 4 streaming events I only did 4. They were definitely lucrative. I think people appreciate it, especially I was in Connecticut. I haven't been to my apartment in New York City since March 10th. So I was holed up in Connecticut, but a lot of people for, March, April, no one was going anywhere. All the restaurants were even closed and everything else. So a lot of people would say with the stream, like, thank you so much for making us feel like things were somewhat normal again. They'd crack open a bottle of wine. Cheers. And, and they would, just listen to the different artists streaming for the night and kick in, whatever they wanted to on PayPal and Venmo. So that's kind of been the rundown of how COVID's been over here. I mean, I think that for me, it's been a positive. I've tried to turn it into that, and just really reevaluating my approach and making the best of that, and definitely being grateful for that. You know, the negative is in some ways you feel like a lot of your purpose has been taken away. You know, I mean, you know, because I love entertaining people. I mean, and that's connection. So obviously we don't get to do a whole lot of that. We had also done a gig, sorry, I forgot to mention, at Woodbury Brewing Company. They have a great thing going on outside on their patio. They're trying to keep live music alive. So it's great, but it's also, you know, a reformation of a decision I made a long time ago. I mean, when I first decided to do the arts, that was a sacrifice. You know, I mean, New York rent isn't cheap. And the whole reason you're in New York is to go out, you know, go to the bars, go to the restaurants, go to see shows. That's not cheap either. So it was really just a reformation of, I feel like I chose the right thing. And someone the other day said, well, what do you think is going to happen with the industry, you know, with acting in New York or with music? And I was like, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think it's going to come back with a fire. And they're like, well, but you know, people might be nervous and all these people can't afford to stay in the city. I'm like, look, man, I'll shovel crap for 2 years if I have to. And then when the industry comes back, I'll jump right back in. Like, you know, for a lot of us with what we do, this isn't something that you do it because it's a part of you and it's a part of what you love. And like I said, I feel like it's my purpose. So for me, if I have to and then jump back on the stage when the time comes, I'll do it. You know, it's not like all of a sudden one day I'm going to retire from it. And I think I've see a lot of artists who are doing that. They're just like, all right, well, we'll wait it out then until it comes back. So, I mean, you don't work that hard for 15 years to just throw it all out. So that's kind of my summation of the experience thus far. Yeah.
And I know, Robin, you'd said before, you know, that observation of your father's, that, you know, it's always tough. It's always been a tough business. It's always been a horrible business to try and be in. And this is the latest in those challenges that you're always going to face. So I'm really impressed with the way you've taken this, Jeff.
Thank you.
Because I mean, one thing I would ask is the experience of streaming without the immediacy of an audience.
Right.
How have you coped with that? How do you think that's affected you?
Well, so what's been interesting, I mean, so the Oakdale stream was a little more difficult because we were on the Oakdale stage. So, you know, we pretty much had my wife walking around with 2 phones, and then the Oakdale was filming from their phone. So that was just kind of like, you're going to get what you're going to get, you know, or whatever. But what was great about the streaming experience, all of the others, is that pretty much how you see me right now. I have, you know, my phone on a stand, on a phone stand, creatively named. And so I was playing, and as I was playing, I'm somewhat looking into the camera. Now, when you're dealing with a more expansive audience, you try to make your eye contact when you can, but you're like anything in theater or in rock and roll, you're performing to a greater audience. You try to make the macro and intimate situation. So the advantage, and what was kind of nice about the streaming, was it was almost as if you were at a campfire, and, you know, people would chime in like, oh, I love that song, or can you play this song off of your first record that, you know, you haven't played in forever? Or of course you'd have a request for a cover or two here and there. And just to see all these people coming together, you know, I do believe at its heart that human beings want to congregate and they want to be together and they want to celebrate life. So streaming was the closest option to that. And I loved it. You know, it's definitely not an alternative to the live rock and roll experience, but it was definitely something that I never would have considered doing before, and that I think I would continue to do even after we get out of this mess.
No, I mean, that's really interesting, and it
was intimate, I guess, to be clear. You know, it made things more intimate.
Yeah,
and a more person-to-person thing. You know, which we can lose a lot.
Yeah, that's good. And some of the stuff that we've heard again over the last few weeks is where streaming is really working well is where people are accepting the fact that it's not the same as performing live in front of an audience. And, you know, so the presentation and what you do, what you give to people and how you behave is somewhat different. You've got to have that expectation and not expect just to go and do the thing you do live in a small box. And that's
it definitely kind of definitely challenges you to just have to, you know, take another approach, you know. I mean, kind of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you're building your toolbox, you know. So, I mean, I was really nervous the first day that I did it.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, all right, going live in an hour, like totally thrown together, set up an amp, went and did the thing, and was pleasantly surprised when I was done, both emotionally and financially.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and creatively, and you know,
Yeah.
this will kind of be a question, I guess, for everybody as well. Is you've been able to take that sort of breather of you know, be able to stop, breathe out, and decide what to do next. With any songwriting that you're doing, do you think you're approaching that differently? Do you think what will come out of this experience as far as new songs will be dramatically different to what you've done before?
Well, I'd say from a writing approach, I mean, I guess the short answer is yes. You know, I had just come out of, I mean, I'm not a writer who cranks a new record out every year. I try to, you know, I try to really sit with it and refine it. You know, I guess, yeah, it's more of like a, you know, a distilling process, or like a wine or something like that. I usually sit on it for a while. So the fact that I coincidentally had started recording in August, I had last year my wife had cancer, so we were dealing with chemo and all that. So I'm actually on a 2-year stretch of some crazy stuff going down.
Yep.
And I actually used that. I was like, I need something positive to go on. Everything worked out. By the way, fast forward to the end of that, thank God. But you know, I was like, this has been a hard run. I need something positive. So I dove into creating a record. Then with that record, there are some tracks that didn't make it to this album that will make it to the next. And then there were some songs that were also sitting around in the back of my head. But I've always felt like if I clear my palate, I can sit down to like the next meal is going to be or whatever, you know. So as soon as I put a certain amount out, I feel like the universe rewards, or the muse rewards you and says, okay, you finished that piece of art, now on to this next one. So the one thing I will be less nervous about, and it comes to the streaming or maybe just the experiences, is I've always kind of tried to make everything somewhat of a spectacle, or, you know, a little bit larger than life. And I think with the streaming and just with this experience, I'm willing to put myself out there as a more intimate singer-songwriter. And, you know, if you don't like it, that's cool. The other stuff's still there for you. I'm still going to create that, but I'm willing to kind of open up other doors that maybe commercially I was avoiding.
That's interesting, and that does kind of feed into that sort of overall question I posed online about what's going to happen to all those people who are involved in big spectacle, live stuff, as we come out of this. But well, thanks very much. Stay online.
Of course.
We'll move on to our next speaker.
Yeah. Can't wait to hear.
I'm going to pop you on mute, just so we can move on, and over to Robin.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, so to another wonderful recording artist, we're going to go to Bob Kinkel, who, you there, Bob?
Okay, I'm on.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I can hear you, but I don't have you on my video here. There you are.
Hey.
Okay, so
Okay.
I had your son Oliver in English class, and a wonderful, wonderful kid. How's he doing?
He's doing great. He's doing
Good.
great. He's been spending his time developing a video game, actually. He's been writing it and animating it. It's pretty cool.
Great, so we'll have him on next week. No, I'm kidding. So Bob, give us your resume. Don't go for half hour, 45 minutes. That'll be great. If you can boil it down a little bit, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Grew up outside of Buffalo in Williamsville, New York, where they had, fabulous music programs. So was always into music since I was really young. And, had bands in high school, went off to Hamilton College, ended up being a music major, went from, pre-med to music major with almost a double major in physics. Always had a band on the band on campus. We played all the house parties and all that stuff back then in the 70s. And after college, I worked for the physics department at Hamilton and was a church organist, and still trying to keep the band together, and ended up getting a full ride to Columbia in physics. So I was studying solid state physics, working on a master when I quit halfway through and went to work at Record Plant for free. And so I went through that whole, I got to learn from all the greatest people, I think I got there in 81, so, Cyndi Lauper's doing her debut record, Jay Giles is mixing freeze frame record upstairs, got Willie Nile in one studio, you get, Joan Jett's coming through, everybody who's anybody came through Record Plant. And it was just an amazing place to learn production and get that whole side together. And at the time, that's what I thought I wanted to do, just, engineer, produce. And I'd also started playing in bands locally in New York City. And through being at Record Plant, assisting on sessions, and I discovered that I was as good or better than most of the session keyboard players that were coming through, because I never really knew how good I was. I didn't really go to like a conservatory or play music from that aspect. So I kind of branched out and started doing session playing. Few clients I'd met at Record Plant called me up just randomly, and one of the first things I did was a commercial with my friend Charlie Morrow, which was the hefty trash bag commercial that was played all through like the second half of the 80s. So all of a sudden, I'm with my friend Charlie going, hefty, hefty, hefty. And all of a sudden I'm in, and that led to being in SAG and AFTRA and that whole side of the world. So I did commercials for a while, and, a few record things as they came up, and then got a call out of the blue from my friend Jim Ball, who is an engineer at Record Plant, and said, I got this guy who wants to put a full orchestra, kind of like a war between rock band and orchestra. And, can you make an orchestra? I had one of the first samplers at the time that was pretty easy to use. It was an Emulator 2, where you get like 12 whole seconds of sample time. And so I said, sure. So I came in, it was this band Sabotage, and the producer was Paul O'Neill. And I came in, it was in Record Plant Studio A, all my stuff was there, and, met these guys. It was like, it's a real heavy metal band, so everybody had skull necklaces on, there was candles burning everywhere. But they're like the nicest people in the world and talented as hell. So anyway, they were doing the Hall of the Mountain King. So basically, the band had already played parts, and I did the entire orchestra, and then I made this whole big intro soundscape for them, and did a few other things on the record, and subsequently played on like the next 4 Sabotage records, or anything Paul was working on, he'd hire me for. And then Paul and I started writing in the early 80s. We had written a couple musicals, one called Romanoff When Kings Must Whisper, and another one called Running in the Passion of a Fairy Tale Moon. And we had a contract with William Morris, and that was moving forward. And then Paul had an idea for like doing this Christmas Carol thing, his Carol of the Bells, and came to me, and we started working on that, and ended up with what became Christmas Eve Sarajevo 12/24. And out of that, had the single initially on a Sabotage record, and this guy Mason Dixon down in Tampa, Florida, just saw the record there, put it on because he knew the band was local, and the phones lit up. And then he calls his friend Scott Shannon up in New York, which is the biggest radio station at the time, and they played it a week later, and the phones lit up, and they got to Cleveland with Bill Lewis and a few other cities that year. And then talking with Jason Flom, Paul was talking with him and wanted to do an entire Christmas record kind of like this. So that's when Trans-Siberian Orchestra was born, and Christmas Eve and Other Stories was the first record, and that came out in 1996. And 5 records later, I think we sold a lot of records. The tour became huge. It became like one of the top 10 tours in the world, basically. Played for over 1 million people every year, and things are just grown and still going pretty strong. So that's kind of the fast track of what. And now I stopped touring about 10 years ago. I was the musical director. I did all the arranging. I co-wrote and co-produced. Worked in the studio on all the records, and stopped touring about 10 years ago. And working with my partner now on her project called Avalana, which we have a full record done, releasing the 6th song on Friday, and it's called September Moon, and so it'll be on streaming everywhere. And what else? So yeah, working at home, doing a lot of writing during this downtime.
That was going to be my sorry, Rob. That was going to be my question. It's this project you're working on right now. Getting a little bit like Jeff. Do you feel this forced COVID downtime has really helped you with getting that done? Do you think it's given you any benefit? Quite a bit. We're working on developing a theatrical version of Avalana, and we had our first workshop scheduled for March 27th, and this hit, so we had to shut that all down, and we're actually working more. It was going to have virtual elements, so we're just focusing on that side of it right now. And yeah, we've done the concerts, just me and Dina playing, for tips. So we've done a few charity events, and luckily, because I'm also an engineer and producer, you can make it sound really good at home. You've got the technology to do that. Good.
I've got a full recording studio at home, and I also have a big one out in Queens, and so I'm totally self-contained as far as that goes. So it's very easy to get a good sound, and so I'm lucky from that aspect. I'm not just like putting my phone up and playing.
Yeah.
So that's worked out well, and it's cool. It's like historically, and you guys would know which plays it was, but I think didn't Shakespeare write Romeo and Juliet during the Black Plague? It was either that or one or the other one. So maybe he wrote 2 during that. So it's like a time to kind of hunker down and write and do what you can. So we've been kind of holed up in the apartment mostly, but we're in Upper West Side of Manhattan, so we go out every few days and go to Trader Joe's and get food or whatever. But mostly we're staying home writing and work. I've learned so many different things. I'm good at Photoshop now. I can Premiere. I'm learning all these different things. And the same way Jeff was saying, we have a great friend, Dave Edgar, who's an amazing string player, and he was trapped in Pittsburgh for 4 months, but discovered a way he could record. He found this little studio where they would sneak him in. It was in a church, so they'd just come pick him up because it was in total lockdown there. And so we'd write a song, send it off to him, get all string parts back. And so it's been really kind of cool working with this. We did a few collaborative things around the world with this guy in the Philippines. He's the chief of the tribe, but he's also an amazing musician. So we did a cover a Message in the Bottle, the Police song. Just with people from all over the place, and that was wonderful. And just been doing a lot virtually, but mostly hunkering down, writing, and moving forward on however possible with all the other projects.
Yeah, I got a quick question, Bob. You said you haven't been touring for 10 years. Now my question is, do you miss it? And are you prevented from doing it now because you miss it so much? Or is this just, another day in Bob Kinkel's life that he's just writing?
It's kind of another day, but I mean, as far as the TSO tour, I mean, it was still been going strong, but it is canceled this year. Mm-hmm. This is the first time. It was supposed to be the 22nd year, I think, 22nd tour.
So you would be on that tour? You would be on that tour?
No, I wouldn't go on the tour. I'm help out. I'm in the background. It's I'm, I'll give my 2 cents, whatever. But there's 2 separate tours. If Derek Whelan, took over musical director on the East from me, and then Al Petrelli takes out the West. And, but it's still playing my music, still, so that's all going well. But the I miss parts of the touring. I miss setting up the tour. I miss the first few shows, but it's a really difficult tour. It's playing 8 shows a week, different city every day, sometimes 2 a day. As you were saying, Jeff, it just gets grueling. Sometimes, you kind of lose track of where you are at times. So
yeah, and that I think is one of the things I just want to sort of chat about in sort of a little more detail is, that whole sort of moving an industry around from place to place has to have a significant effect on the people who are involved in that, the people who are organizing that, and also the venues and the people who rely on that locally for the livelihood.
Oh yeah, I mean, TSO has between both tours probably 230 people on the road, between band, crew, drivers, catering, all that stuff. And then each venue, there's local stagehands.
Yep.
You got your pushers, you got your riggers, you got the local electricians, you got everybody, all the different unions involved there, and all the different jobs. And then you have the people doing parking, you got people running the building, concessions, all that stuff. So the residual effect of not touring is huge. You're talking thousands and thousands of people that are not working just from the lack of the TSO shows, and the lack of everything is just huge. You got the big agencies kind of either closing down or downsizing a lot. You've got Columbia Arts Management just basically shut down. They were the biggest for classical music and all that. They're poof.
Yeah, I guess with classical music especially, where you're dealing with a lot of individuals in an orchestra to start with, and a lot of people wanting to come and sit and watch orchestras. It is perhaps more like staging a play or staging a live performance with actors, where you've got a larger crew of people putting something on for a larger audience, and the economics just don't work unless you've got that volume of people. Yeah,
it's difficult. You're talking all arena shows but one thing, just like being scaled down, what Jeff was talking about, doing the virtual shows was kind of cool because it for small shows especially, we'd play in New York and maybe have 200-300 people, but you can do a virtual show and it's like all the people around the world can join in. So it's extended your available audience, which is kind of interesting. And I think even when live comes back, there's going to be a virtual add-on almost all the time from now on. It's just as a way to put things together. And it's also interesting seeing the different technologies people have been doing. Like there's this one company that's down in Nashville, and they basically created a rock and roll live theater space. And because no one's touring, you have all these giant video screens just sitting in warehouses. So they partnered up with Claire Brothers, and they set up these video screens in sections that would be like the equivalent of being in the front of the audience, in orchestra kind of seats, the balcony and all that. So they had all these things set up, and you could buy a ticket, and your video image would show up to the performers. Oh, so basically, our friend Chloe Laurie was trying this out a couple of weeks ago, and you're just singing, and you're singing to screens everywhere, but people can react and clap. It's of course, with all the delays, it's even worse than live people clapping, where people in the back are like 2 beats behind.
Yeah.
But it was a way. It's a really creative way of doing it, and it's people are really innovative. Times of crisis really can spark innovation. Yeah,
we kind of heard some of that last week. We had Tech company, DNR Labs, on, who been getting involved in quite a bit of that kind of the way of being able to technically stage shows when you have to have people distanced, and the challenges involved in that. They talked about a comedian they were working with who was really having trouble because the audience was so far away that there was no immediacy and no feedback, and no way to address the audience. So they were looking at ways that they could kind of make that work. And I think similar to the screens idea, the way to bring the audience to the performer. When we really think about it being the performer going to the audience, you've really got to get the audience to the performer as well. So no, that's really, really interesting. I think again, Bob, stay online. We're going to move on. So Robin, over to you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So if the comedian is so far from the audience, then the hecklers have a harder job, right?
I guess so.
Must like that. All right. Anyway, actress Julie Galdieri from New York City. How are you?
I am unmuted now. Yes, I'm great.
Now you're great.
Yeah, now I'm great.
Met you through my longtime thespian friend, John Bergdahl, and you guys put on an amazing rendition of the Scottish play at the Lion, I believe, on Theatre Row. Yeah, was it the Lion?
It was the Lion. Good memory.
Right. And then, and so I met you out at we're talking about the restaurant that we were at, and it was really cool. It was September. I remember it was about this time a couple of years ago.
Yes, yep. It was the fall. It was a crisp evening.
It was a beautiful
and your
night.
laptop was no longer with you. So sorry.
Yeah. So anybody out there with a Chromebook? So Julie,
they could be watching you now, Phil.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now.
So Julie, give us a synopsis of your highlights of your career, and then you can talk a little bit about how this wonderful pandemic is affecting you, pros and cons and all of that stuff.
Great. I'll do the speed version. So just like our two other guests, I always was performing from the time I, came out of the womb. And then all throughout high school, I was involved in all of the shows, any show that was available. And then I went to Amherst College, kept acting there. I was also singing there. And then for grad school, I went to Trinity Rep in Providence. And that's where I started getting my equity card, the old fashioned way, with equity membership points, little by little, very slow process. And while I was at Trinity, I became convinced that the only work I ever wanted to do was classical, so idealistic and so pure. And I came to New York City with my heart set on only doing Shakespeare. And well, I was doing Shakespeare. It was great. Like, I was doing what I set out to do. I was having problems paying my rent and, buying food, but I was reciting verse. That's good. But then I realized, there are other ways that I can act. It doesn't have to be so one track. And I was involved in a lot of different plays in New York at that time. And then someone introduced me to this whole world of industrials, as they used to be called. Business theater, these large scale events for pharmaceuticals or for Xerox or for tech companies. And so I started doing spokesperson work. And one day when I was rehearsing, there was a script that I just could not get inside of my mouth. Like, the way that the words were written, it was just not working. And so I asked the guy who wrote it, this is usually, best way to lose a job. But I said to him, can I take this home and rewrite this? Because I think that I just need to sit with it a little bit. I think I just need to make it my own. And for some reason, this guy said, sure. And so I brought it home, I rewrote it, I came back the next day, and it was fine. It was, it worked. And so after that, this creative director came over and said, have you ever thought of doing this? And I didn't quite know what this was. And this, I learned, was writing scripts and writing speeches and becoming a creative director for these large-scale corporate events. And so I started doing that while I was still acting in New York. And at some point, the balance kind of shifted so that I was writing more than I was acting, and I was really missing acting. But around the same time as that balance, I was watching one of these executives that I had written for, and he walked out on stage and he was terrified, like absolutely terror-stricken. And a light bulb went off. In retrospect, a very obvious light bulb, which is, oh, I'm an actor. I can help him. I can start a whole business helping people who are executives after I write their speeches, and I can actually teach them acting. Like, I can teach them Stanislavski. Don't tell them that, but they'll be fine. They'll be fine. And so I started a speech writing and sort of performance coaching company right around the same time that my very dear friend, whom I think you also know, Marika Becks, and I were having a conversation about theater. And she and I were essentially saying the same thing to each other about the kind of work that we wanted to do. And, as we know here, everyone on this conversation knows that it's up to us to create the work that we really long to do. And so that was the genesis of the Set Collective. So Marika and I started that company. And so since then, that was back in 2012. Since then, we've done several productions. And this fall, we were going to do a staging, actually a full production of a play called Reservoir. Gorgeous, gorgeous play by Eric Henry Sanders. It's a modern day interpretation of Wojciech, where he takes the soldier's madness, but he interprets it as PTSD, a very young vet coming home from war and dealing with PTSD. Just a 5-person play. Ian Morgan from the New Group was going to direct it. I'm saying this in the past tense. This will happen after COVID, right? But it was like March was the moment where we were starting to fundraise, and then people weren't so keen on parting with their money after, COVID hit. So, so we have that to plan for and look forward to, and we had some really great actors involved, and that will happen. So in the meantime, the interesting thing, I have to say, when the pandemic first hit, I love the name of your podcast, Keep the Ghost Light On, because what I found was that we were having problems keeping the ghost light on in ourselves. People were kind of dormant because we were, Set Collective was trying to get a couple of projects off the ground via Zoom, doing readings, asking people to share pieces that meant something to them during this time, because we didn't know where we were going. Early March, mid-March, we had no idea how long this was going to go. And people were very quiet. I think everybody just needed to get their bearings, right? But now, and over the last couple of months, things have started to take off again. I'm right now in a playwriting circle where we're trying out new scenes with each other via Zoom, of course. And Set has something that we're talking about called The Gallery, where it's it's plays that are written in a Zoom friendly format, you know, and that's what we're going to be doing now. We're going to be doing plays that are Zoom friendly for a while. But what's been so interesting about the conversation tonight is that the one thing that was consistent for me from March onward is music. Somehow, the group that I sing with, which is almost 60 women, somehow we figured out how to continue rehearsing. And this whole idea of the delay, right, of course you can't have 60 voices via Zoom. So what it was just very simple. It was an accompanist where all of us were muted and we were just hearing ourselves. And then we would, after the rehearsal, the group rehearsal, we would then go listen to the other harmonies to fit our voice within that. So I just find it so interesting to hear about all of these different approaches of how you can mix sound and you can have great sound, because Rob, as you know, like that's a very difficult thing right now. Even the podcasts that I've watched on television, you know, the streaming services that have had major talent, and yet there will be technical difficulties and sound problems. And so so this is a really interesting time, definitely. I think that what I keep imagining is at St. Anne's Warehouse a couple of years ago, there was a production of Brief Encounter, the Noel Coward play.
Yep.
And what they did is they had live actors on stage, just a few. And then they had the film version, I think it's from the 40s or 50s, I'm not sure.
Yep.
They had the film version. Did you see it, Steve?
I've seen it a few times. Yeah, it's a favorite of mine. Yeah.
Well, they did this brilliant thing where, you know, the film was behind the actors, and the actors were having this interactive relationship with the film itself. And that allowed, and this was way pre-COVID, but that allowed the actors to be distant from each other on stage. And I wonder if we're going to see more of that kind of hybrid approach to theater and live performance.
Certainly that's again, that's a theme which again you may have heard over the last couple of weeks, and we'd heard before that. This notion that there's a format here, that, you know, right now we're all in these little boxes, and you know, if that's what we've got as far as a way to present some kind of performance, then that performance is going to change, and what you can present. For example, your new play that you were really hoping to start sort of building and progressing back in March. Depending on what you believe will happen,
yes,
the way you can present it will certainly affect the way you workshop that play, and the way you can present it. And technology will need to play a part in that.
Absolutely. The interesting thing about this play, it is 5 characters. The scenes only have 2 people in them, and the only important element on stage need be one prop, which is a knife. And therefore, you know, there might be a way, when we are allowed to congregate again, to stage this play in a somewhat normal experience.
Yeah.
You know, it all requires a lot of new thinking, which is really exciting, you know, especially within live performance, to imagine how we can recreate space, like the idea of intimacy. And for instance, I don't know if any of you heard about what some soap operas were doing. They were having the intimacy scenes with mannequins. over the summer.
But in the UK, there's a long-running soap on in the evening called EastEnders, and it went off the air. They slowed down. They'd already got a bunch of episodes. They slowed those down as far as when they were releasing them. Then they couldn't do any more. They've just come back, and they've got setups where two people are actually in a scene together. There's plexiglass in between them. You can't see it. It's manufactured so that you don't see a glare, so they still look like they're in the same scene. And some of those intimacy scenes have been with their partners at home. Presumably they've sent the wig or they've sent the outfit to, and so they're kissing their own wife, their own husband, their own boyfriend.
That
whatever.
is amazing.
So there's ways to make it work. There's ways to make it work. But,
I mean, just think about the consistency in the lighting. I mean, that really.
Absolutely,
wow, that is impressive.
It's a technical feat, and that kind of brings us nicely onto sort of opening it up to a group. So thanks, Julie. That's
sure.
It's fascinating, and it really is, as I said earlier, it really is positive. And you're right. When all this happened, there's a lot of, well, this is the end. It's what are we going to do now? And we've kind of gone through that sort of stage where now we're at that point where those that have the ability and the vision are seeing their way out of this, or acknowledging the fact that it's not the same as it was, and it may not be the same as it was for a while. So so guys, Jeff and Bob, if you want to take yourselves off mute. We've got a couple of minutes left. I just want to throw out sort of that second question. I think we've talked about the way that large scale stuff is being affected. I think we've kind of covered that, and you've nicely articulated that. Now I want to throw out that very specific question about what practically do people think can be done to support the whole range of people who are involved with performance, who are behind the scenes. What can be done? The ones who aren't necessarily on the front line of creating and aren't taking the time to sit back and create stuff. They've got to pay the bills. They've got to do the job that they're skilled in. And any feeling for what can practically be done to help with that?
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you started.
Bang! Starting gun.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I mean,
go ahead, Bob. Bob, go ahead.
Right, I'll go.
You've got it, Bob.
So, like behind the scenes people in music, you have your recording engineers or video editors, all those people. There was a great meme that was out. It was a picture of a recording engineer before COVID, a recording engineer after COVID. Is one guy sitting in a room in front of a mixer. Nothing changed. There's
right.
like the bands aren't coming in and all that, but or video editors just kind of sitting in front of the screen, and people are kind of getting creative. So people in that technical side are doing fine, but you'd see like guys who are set builders in theater. A friend of mine ran into one of these guys who was like building the most beautiful enclosure, because in New York all the restaurants are outside. He was building an enclosure for the tables that take over a parking place, and he goes up to him and goes, "This is not what you do normally." He goes, "No, I'm a set builder." But it's people.
Wow.
You have to survive. So it's those who can innovate will figure out a way.
Yeah.
Julie,
I was going to say, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, Julie, have you known any of your actor friends that be like, I'm out of here, I quit, I can't support myself, it's done? I hate to throw a wrench in the works, but I just wanted to see what the temperature was out there for that.
I have got to tell you, not a one.
Wow.
Not a one. And
Awesome.
maybe that's because I am now of the age where I am seasoned. So maybe those of us who are seasoned aren't giving up. You know, maybe if you are 25 and this is your first year in New York, I can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine that that would be really overwhelming and really scary. So maybe you would want to leave. But I have not heard from anyone who I am in contact with currently who is leaving.
So all of those 60 voices, they're still in there.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. That's
Although
great.
we can't see each other, you know, but we can see each other via Zoom.
That's
But
right.
you know, the answer to the question that I was going to say before, which now I'm just thinking about how this would work, just as a set builder is now building, you know, restaurants outside, since live events, and we're talking huge scale live events, like Trans-Siberian Orchestra, you know, enormous venues, I'm wondering, since they're going to be a hybrid, probably, right? You're going to have some people live and some people virtual, and some people will be remote. I wonder if that, because there are two lanes now, if that provides more opportunity for jobs behind the scenes. I wonder if the people who have to be there live to create the sets can somehow be there safely, and the people who don't have to be there live, like the sound engineers, maybe they can be remote. I don't know. I wonder if there's a way to maintain job safety for people that way.
Yeah, I don't see the large scale stuff coming back for a while. It's just because you can't really put on something of that magnitude without everybody there. And
Polestar was saying 2022.
Without a packed audience, there's really no one to play for on that level. So I think things are going to be way smaller and way more intimate for a while.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that I figured I'd speak to on that level. I mean, obviously, talking to some of my Polestar and stuff, they said, you know, late 2021, 2022 for a lot of the big scale stuff. Sorry, I muted myself for a second. You know, on that tip, though, I think that, and both from, you know, I coincidentally have 3 New Yorkers on this interview as well, but to the New York point and to the, I see a lot of opportunity for things as well, as far as, you know, New York, people are like, oh, all these corporations are moving out and they're you know, they're probably not coming back. They're going to do everything remote. I'm like, well, good. Maybe a couple independent restaurants will open up, and maybe a couple more music clubs will open up. And I mean, even something as Rob was just saying about like Trans-Siberian Orchestra, it started as a metal band playing that, you know. So I mean, where did Hamilton start? What started at New York Theater Workshop? What started at St. Anne's, as Julie mentioned? You know, I think that, you know, we're going to get all the big stuff back sooner or later. It's going to be a wait for a minute, but I do think that there's going to be a great opportunity for all of these. There'll be a little bit less noise. So I think that people, like, as I said, even with a small pub gig that I did, which I hadn't done in a while back, people were dying to see it. So my hope is, I think that they will open certain venues, you know, up to, maybe it'll be 500 to 1,000 or whatever it's going to be. You know, we might not see, you know, Wicked's theater open right away or something like that, but you will see some of the smaller stuff as they do all this. And I think it's going to be an opportunity to really see, I think a lot of things are going to get their notice that might have gotten lost in the noise before, you know, and I got to kind of feel that way about New York in general too. You know, I mean, obviously there's a lot of challenges and crime is going up and all that, but you know, with a lot of stuff moving out, there's room to move in. If the rents go down, there leaves a lot of room for artistic. Sometimes those artists don't always have the biggest budgets to work with. So, you know, I keep trying to see the opportunity of it. You know, if you hold on to the way things used to be, and this is just in general, like, you know, my Rage Against the Machine tickets have been pushed off, and they'll probably be pushed off twice. But like, I believe it's all going to come back. But you know, I do think that there's a real chance for things to bloom. You know, I think that we're going to go. This winter might be a little tough, you know, because we're going into another cold spell again. But I think as soon as we come out of that, and after we navigate through that, we'll start seeing things, we'll come into the spring of COVID, so to speak, or the outro of COVID, the spring of that. I think 2021 is going to be a good year. And I think that artists in general, as Julie was saying too, for some of us who have been in this for a while, we've already navigated and persevered through this stuff. So as I said earlier, it's like, hell no, this isn't going to stop now. We'll keep pushing out, we keep finding a way, because this is what you do. So, and I would say, as far as helping other events people, because some of the technical aspects were spoken about by Rob and Julie, I think that, you have a lot of small events companies too. Power Station Events is a company that I work with in Cheshire, and they book a lot of bands and stuff. But you'll see all these different, the different companies within New York or whatever who do small AV setups or large AV setups or all that stuff. I think that what the general public can do to support that is, plan your wedding. Plan your wedding, and if you have the money and the funds to do so, put down the deposit. You're not going to lose your deposit. If you have to move it again, they're going to move it. You're under contract. You're not going to lose your money. I think that if you have the money, start making plans and start investing in that. Put down that $1,000 on that band, put down that $200 on that DJ, or that, that venue rental, that private venue rental, because in your contracts, they all have a thing that will say, we'll find a mutually agreeable date if the other date doesn't work out. Usually it's an act of God, weather and all that stuff. But I'd say we're sure as hell in the middle of one of those right now. So,
Absolutely.
I say if people have the resources to do it, book things, but buy your concert ticket. Like I said, I was excited for the Rage Against the Machine show, but I had my ticket, and I think I had an option whether to get a refund or whether to keep the ticket. So I'm like, I already bought the ticket. I'm going to keep the ticket. Like, I'm trying to keep as much of my, as many resources as can be sent to the industry right now as possible. You will get that back. That's what I would say to the general public.
And that is, the Rage Against the Machine is the most important band right now because of the rage. So
very, very good, Robin. Very good, Robin.
and the machine
and the machine as well. Yeah. I think we've come to a natural conclusion. Again, it's been a fascinating evening. I've learned a lot, and certainly, again, very positive. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Julie. That those who survived so far in the industry or in the performing arts know that there's always something else. And there's always somewhere else to go. It doesn't take away the fact, as we say, a lot of people are hurting because
absolutely.
Until we get a bit further along, there's there's not a lot of joy, but there will be a creative explosion. And I think, Jeff, you're absolutely right. A lot of this creativity is going to come out in smaller venues. It's going to feed into, certainly, the off Broadway scene is likely to be very very exciting when this all comes back, and all these playwrights who've been writing the hearts out.
Off Broadway means the Sherman Playhouse.
The Sherman Playhouse, yeah. Don't forget the Sherman. If you want a venue to try something out, try the Sherman Playhouse. But
how many offs does it take to get to Connecticut?
Well, there you go. Not as many as you think. But in fact, this is where your audience is going to be, because they're all flooding to Connecticut, the Hudson Valley from New York. So this is where your audience is going to be. But seriously, though, we've had a great time tonight. Before we jump off, Jeff, when is your new album coming out, and what's it called again?
It's called Hudson Delta, and my guess is probably February 2021. We're doing all the marketing rollout stuff, and as they say in this industry, especially Rob, I'm sure you know, with recording and stuff, it's like expect it to take twice as long and cost twice as much. So I'm going with a definite February 2021. I think that we're going to work on all the marketing right now and then release it then.
Okay, and are you releasing any tracks from that in the meantime?
Yeah, we might do what they call a waterfall. We might put out a single or two in the next month or so. on Spotify and all streaming and all that. So yeah.
Okay, so everyone keep an ear out for Jeff and Bob.
Thank you.
Your project that you've been working on, is that anywhere near ready to fly?
Yeah, we're rolling out the 6th single this Friday. It's Avalona, it's Avalon with an A on Avalona. And you can see avalanamusic.com. We'll have links to everything, but we are YouTube, Spotify, everywhere. And then we're also working on a virtual show, which should be appearing early next year.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for that. And Julie, do you have anything you want to sell while you're on here?
Well, I will blast all of you as soon as we get one of our Zoom plays up.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have you as our audience. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'll connect with you on Facebook as well, because I'm really interested to hear about the way all that is working for you.
Cool.
I have a vested interest, because that's probably going to be the way we need to go up here as well, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
So
excellent.
Thank you all so much. Robin, have you got any final words?
No, thank you very much, guys. And this is recorded, so we'll put it out on Facebook as a recorded piece broadcast. If anybody missed it and wants to see your beautiful faces in boxes like the Brady Bunch. And so I think that's wonderful, and I really appreciate Steve doing that. And then hopefully you guys can come back and watch next week. We got a Hollywood recorder who did Frozen and Frozen 2, Tom Hardesty, who did a lot of the recording for those films, is going to be on. So that's really cool. And other people. If I'm missing you, sorry. I'll apologize on my own. So, but we had great people coming up in October as well. This thing's rolling, and it's all due to you guys. Yeah. And it's just so positive. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the other thing that we'd like to say is that we have been saying this to other guests as well. We may well come back to you in a little while to have you back again to see how your projects are going. As we see how all this develops, what the take is on what we think today, as opposed to the way that things are in the future. So
that's our second wave.
Yes. If you're open to that, we won't leave you alone.
Hopefully it doesn't coincide with another one.
Exactly.
That's right. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody, and thank you to everybody on Facebook and those who've joined us on Zoom. We've had a blast, and we'll be back again same time next Monday for another Keep the Ghost Light On with the Sherman Playhouse and Robin Frome. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye now.
Thank
you.
Take care.
Bye.